Well, we have great news today, guys, and it's all falling into place, just as we thought. If you remember, we did a video on the Epstein case and the useless video that was released missing 1 minute. In that video, we discussed the common factor in the Epstein, Maxwell, and Diddy cases, and that common denominator was Jim Comey's daughter, Maurene Comey, who was a lead attorney on all of them. In 2024, the younger Comey argued to keep the Epstein files sealed because they would interfere with Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal. Does that sound right to you? Now it appears that much of the evidence in the case is missing. Well, guess what? She was fired yesterday by the Department of Justice. It appears that all cases that incriminate the powerful go to the Southern District of New York, and it's being systematically cleansed. In April, Matthew Podolsky, acting U.S. Attorney for the office, agreed to step down under pressure, and POTUS then installed Jay Clayton. Maurene Comey wasn't given the option to step down. Now, it's not just her father that spells out 8,647 inches in shells who was fired. She has followed in her father's footsteps and is hopefully one step closer to her own prosecution if the evidence hasn't been destroyed. Personally, I think she was kept on to gather evidence on her, so let's see how this shakes out. There's now been 5 lawsuits in 2 weeks from former New York Police Department members accusing Mayor Eric Adams of corruption under his watch. The most recent was on July 16th by former interim NYPD Commissioner Thomas Donlan, accusing Adams and several high-ranking NYPD officials of operating the police department as a criminal enterprise. The complaint alleges systemic corruption, including wire fraud, mail fraud, honest services fraud, obstruction of justice, and retaliation against whistleblowers. Donlan claims that during his 2-month tenure at the end of 2024, he saw widespread misconduct by NYPD leadership, including fabricated promotions, unearned raises, inflated pensions, and unchecked overtime for particular employees. He says that when he raised concerns with Adams, he was sidelined, stripped of authority, and ultimately removed from his position in a coordinated humiliation and leaked it to the New York Post as retaliation. 4 other former high-ranking officers, including former Chief of Detectives James Essig, filed similar suits on July 8, 2025, claiming a culture of cronyism and retaliation, with promotions allegedly sold for $15,000 and unqualified individuals placed in elite units. Adams faced federal corruption charges in 2024 under the Biden administration, but the charges were dropped in early 2025, amid speculation of a deal tied to immigration enforcement cooperation. And I have been kinda surprised at how Adams flipped his stance and is shutting down all the immigrant shelters. That's how you get things done sometimes and ultimately reach the people above him. Also on July 16th, President Trump announced on Truth Social that he convinced Coca-Cola to use cane sugar instead of high-fructose corn syrup in its U.S. drinks. This is huge, guys. High-fructose corn syrup is one of the worst and most prominent toxins in our food supply and is a target ingredient that RFK Jr. wants out of our food. Approximately 60 to 75% of all processed foods contain it, and it is one additive that Tim and I are very careful about avoiding at all costs. It's in all kinds of foods, but especially common in drinks including waters, baked goods including breads, condiments like ketchup and salad dressings, canned and dried fruits, and breakfast cereals and bars. High fructose corn syrup causes obesity, diabetes, fatty liver disease, high triglycerides, heart disease, gout, and systemic inflammation because it increases uric acid levels. So if you are a Coke drinker, you just might notice those achy bones feel a lot better after the ingredient is completely removed from our food supply. But if you already have any of these conditions or don't want to get them, you might just want to start reading labels and cut it out of your diet. A case of liver damage was reported from turmeric pills this week in a 57-year-old otherwise healthy New Jersey woman. She was taking 2,250 milligram tablets that also contained black pepper for enhanced absorption 3 times a day. She had only been taking them a couple months and ignored initial symptoms of nausea and weakness. It wasn't until she had signs of jaundice that she went to the hospital. Turmeric is known to cause liver damage, and most products have a warning on them. The moral of the story, guys, is that supplement pills are not natural. Your body was designed to use food as medicine, not pills. If you want to use turmeric for inflammation, use it in your cooking regularly, and eat other anti-inflammatory foods also. If you don't like the taste, don't load yourself up with chemicals. Just choose an assortment of the many other foods and herbs that have been put here for us. I have a list of anti-inflammatory foods in the description for you. The Autopen saga is heating up. The Oversight Project estimates that nearly all of Biden's executive orders and official documents from 2021 to 2025 used an Autopen, except for his 2024 campaign withdrawal letter and his son's pardon, allegedly. There were 51 clemency warrants granting pardons to 4,245 people, including figures like Anthony Fauci, General Milley, and the January 6th committee members. Joe Biden's aide Neera Tanden testified before the House Oversight Committee that she directed the Autopen use. Jill Biden's aide Anthony Bernal pleaded the fifth on every question asked under a subpoena issued by the Oversight Committee, and it's being reported that Biden's chief of staff Jeff Zients is the one who gave final approval. And most recently, the committee issued a subpoena to Annie Tomasini, former Biden deputy chief of staff and senior advisor. So that's over 4,000 potential prosecutions and null and void pardons if this thing plays out in favor of President Trump. On top of everything, a new narrative is forming. Oversight Committee Chair James Comer and others are calling for a special prosecutor for what is being called the Grand Conspiracy Investigation. Kash Patel, FBI Director, has hinted at aggressive investigations into past DOJ and FBI actions. Additionally, Republican lawmakers like Representative Jim Jordan have publicly supported probes into deep state misconduct, which could soon lead to calls for a special prosecutor for the Grand Conspiracy. So that's what's been happening in the news this past week, and let's leave with this quote by President John F. Kennedy. "The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.